we move on to our next session, and that is on generative AI. We are talking a lot about AI today from morning till now. So it's about generative AI shaping the dynamics of the new digital era. Delegates, are you ready for the next session? It's like information overload over here, one after the other, jam-packed. Yes. So we are honored to have with us Mr. Sreejit Roy, a distinguished leader in IBM Consulting, boasting 25 years of experience across manufacturing, consulting, and IT outsourcing, with a background in mechanical engineering and a PGDM from IIM Kolkata. Mr. Sreejit brings a wealth of technical and managerial acumen to the table. His expertise in application development and modernization for hybrid cloud solutions is truly exceptional. So today's session will explore the transformative role of Gen AI, Generation AI, led by Mr. Sreejit Roy, as AI, we all know, is increasingly permeating our daily lives. Understanding its implications, especially from the perspective of Gen AI, is paramount. So we'll delve into how Gen AI's familiarity and adaptability to technology are reshaping the digital landscape. So ladies and gentlemen, let us put our hands together for Mr. Sreejit Roy, the global offering leader of IBM Consulting.
First of all, thank you for having me here. Though it's a bit unfair to have a session after Anish and Surya, to be honest. It's absolutely impossible for anybody to speak after these two phenomenal leaders, and I met another phenomenal leader in the making, a young boy, probably 7, 8 years old, who is already teaching generative AI to students across the world. But since I'm here, please hear me out. The only difference I'll do is I will stay away from teaching generative AI. I'm a consultant by profession. I have not had the opportunity like Anish and Surya to have built a company. I have been with IBM for more than 25 years. I have not changed companies for a long, long time. But today my views are my personal. But the only thing I can assure you is I will not teach generative AI. I'm sure all of you, including me, is fully saturated. I roam across the world. I keep meeting a lot of clients. That's the advantage I've got. And I would like to share what the clients are looking for from a generative AI perspective. And you can take that as an example of how you can run generative AI in your organizations. So there is only one chart. I have 5 to 6 charts, but there is one chart which for me is a learning of what organizations are looking for and how to set up generative AI in your respective organizations. So the first thing when generative AI comes into my mind is many a times we go to a store because there's a big banner which says 70% discount or 80% discount. When you go closer to that banner, you see a small letter saying up to 70% discount. You go a little more closer to the banner, it says on selected items only. You go a bit closer, it says, oh, till stocks last. So by the time you go to the store, the only thing probably you can buy is the socks at 5% discount. That's what you end up with. Again, I'm saying these are my personal views. This is where today generative AI is. Every customer I have been meeting, they want to change the world with generative AI. They want to replace 60, 70%. The first thing when we talk to the CIOs, they say, can you give me 30, 40, 50% discount on the work which you are doing? My personal view, you cannot. There are multiple reasons why you cannot. There's a technology reason, there's a process reason, there's a skill reason, and the question is that one slide, I'm not hyping it up, but it's like a checkbox. All of us have, I'm not like Anish, there's no way I can think of after 10th, I can think that big. But for me, being in a class, I needed a checkbox to answer the question when I'm meeting my boss. I'll just leave you with that checkbox. Please feel free to answer, to use that as a checkbox. So the question is, can we go to the next chart, please? Yeah. So what is generative AI today? This is the view what we are seeing, that we used to use AI as something we are doing, and then we'll add an AI to that engine. From there, we are moving to a world where AI will do the work and we will do something on top of it. That's the fundamental difference where we are moving, and Surya very, very beautifully talked about it when she spoke about it. AI is not going to take away jobs. She gave the Jevons, I don't know how many of you heard her, I'll keep referring to her because she spoke well. This Jevons conundrum that as demands grow, as you build more efficiency, your demand is not going to, I press the central one, yeah, thank you. Your demand is not going to go down. Jobs will not go away. Yeah, jobs will shift, but jobs will not go away because generative AI is going to generate a lot of demand. Till today, 65% of our population is in tier 2, tier 3 and in the villages. That's the opportunity. The reason I came here is because cities like Calicut, tier 2 cities and beyond is where the demand is going to go because of generative AI. This is the future. And that's the reason it interested me. Don't try to read this chart. But the key thing I wanted to give in this chart is two messages. First of all, generative AI is not a solution for each and every process. It is not. It is at least 3 to 5 years away from solving each and every of your problem. So don't just take a use case and try to deploy it. What will happen is you will spoil your reputation because you will be able to solve that use case in a very small scenario, but the enterprise problem, the enterprise is a different ball game, completely different ball game. So pick a use case which is relevant and will give you ROI in the short term. That's the most important thing. What does it mean? For example, if you take this for example, call center. It's very, very easy, and I'll explain in the next chart why I'm saying, for example, call center is very, very amenable to generative AI. But the industry I come from, or we come from, I don't know how many of you are from the IT industry. How many of you have an IT background? Can you just so that, oh, okay, a lot of it, thank you. So I don't know how many of you have tried generative AI, but if you ask me today that can you go ahead and deploy a software right from functional specs to technical specs to testing and so on and so forth, the answer is no. And can you do it in the next 12 months? My personal view, no. The reason being that when you want an enterprise version of a software, you have to be very, very sure that the areas which you cannot test for is taken care of. Let me give a very simple example, and it's a theoretical example. We build a software. I write a functional specs for, let's say, 10,000 scenarios. I create the test scenarios and I test that software for those 10,000 scenarios. This system, generative AI system, starts hallucinating. Let's say I'm building a software for a car and I have created a software for 10,000 of those scenarios. The system hallucinates, and just taking a theoretical example, it says, look, I think based on the 10,000 scenarios, I think every time this car sees a man with a brown shirt and a red cap holding a stick and is about 15 feet hiding behind a tree, I should go and hit that car. I hit that guy because it's a threat. I'm just putting a theoretical scenario. What has happened here is, it has hallucinated. You do not know that it has created a 10-line code in that 50 million line code which enterprise you have deployed. You will not test it. How does it happen? What will happen when ultimately that scenario happens? Today's systems are not ready to test such hallucination. it will take us at least a year or more for us to go back and say, yes, a system is enterprise ready. So my only takeaway from this, there are industry solutions and there are process solutions which are very, very amenable to Gen AI. In your organizations, pick the ones which is going to give you a immediate ROI. It's very easy to pick. So the question is, which ones? If you look on the left hand side, those are the 4 areas: the summarization, conversational, content creation, code creation. As of now, leave it. Don't touch code creation as of now. You can test it out, but it is way years away from developing code which is enterprise ready. It's not moving. Yeah, okay. The other thing which we are seeing in this stampede for deploying generative AI is people are missing out and using generative AI in scenarios where you do not need generative AI. There is no need. Let's say, for example, you create a chat box using a generative AI. Why? Because I want to use an English language to converse with at the back end. But at the back end, there is only simple AI. You and we, as an enterprise, as an organization person, we should be very clear that AI itself can solve at least 70 to 80% of the problem. Why can't I use a generative AI? Generative AI is not cheap. It is not cheap. It is, as of now, expensive and very, very expensive. Imagine an example where you have a development team of let's say 500 people, and one of them is a junior developer and he's accessing the large language model 50 times a day. You don't even know. He's writing a query, he's writing a prompt and testing it out. At the end of the month is when you will get a, I don't know, maybe $500,000 bill. So until and unless you have put the right set of governance, the right set of controls in place, generative AI is a very, very expensive affair as of today. Yeah, with virtual GPUs, there's a lot of research going on. But as of today, stay away from generative AI. Do a proper understanding of what can be solved by AI and where you use generative AI. So if you look on the right hand side, if you're talking about text, image, video, it does it very, very well. There is no AI which can do that. But when you talk about coding, you have to wait. Wait means test it out. It'll take time. People keep asking, how do I deploy generative AI in my organization? So we said, what is generative AI? Where to deploy? Then the next question comes is, how do I deploy? And I'm sorry, this is simplistically put, because not all of you are AI or IT, so I'm just trying to put it extremely simply so that you understand when you have to deploy, what are the learnings. So you have to select a model, you have to select a model tuning. Let's not get into the details, but the model selection, the prompt engineering, and the logic, all of this takes a significant amount of effort and money before you go and deploy a generative AI solution. What is important? And this is my second last slide, and after that, it's my last slide. So, when you pick a generative AI use case, extremely important that the benefits of that generative AI has to align with where your organization wants to do a benefit analysis. For example, if I want to go and improve my customer retention, then focus on money on generative AI use cases which is for customer retention rather than for improving the developer's productivity. I was talking to our CIO last week before last outside India, and that gentleman runs the biggest social service in one of the European countries. We made a phenomenal presentation of what we can do with IT and generative AI and use cases, and it works like magic. At the end of the day, he said, look, Sreejit, what I'm looking for is not development. I can get that done internally. I have a problem of 5,000 people with high attrition. Tell me how you will resolve that attrition problem with generative AI. Because to me, if I'm able to solve that, my significant portion of my cost will reduce. So that's the choice of what kind of use case you build is an important factor in your decision what use case you will build. There are 6 areas, and this is where I'll spend probably 10 minutes in this chart, which is the checkbox I was talking about. When the first thing you have to understand is the choice of technology. When you talk about choice of technology, what kind of business, first you select what the business requirements are, what the business area you want to focus on, then selecting the foundation model. We have all heard of GPT, we have heard of BARD and so on and so forth. Please remember my analysis of what we are seeing, a lot of testing is a large language model is not always the best model. You don't need a large language model to solve each and every problem. There are 2 reasons for it. One, large language models are very, very bulky, it's very difficult to fine tune. But the second model is, unless you fine tuning means you are using your own data to make it learn. So I can use a model which is trained on internet data, but then if I have to use it for my organization, I have to train it on my data. It is extremely difficult to train a 70 billion parameter model. Start with a small model. Start with a model which is designed towards your business, towards your industry, because that will help you arrive at your business outcome much faster. There are multiple clients who have come back to us and saying, we have been working on generative AI for the last 1 year, results have been 0. Why result? What does 0 mean? It's not the use cases have not worked out, but the efficiency or the efficacy of the use cases is close to 20 to 30%. You can't take it to an enterprise if your efficiency of an use case is 30%. So large language is not always required. Select, there are multiple smaller models. Please try them out before you get into a large language model. Though I'm not saying you should not go to large, but make the right choices. Infrastructure, you have to make a decision. GPUs is almost become non-existent. It is so difficult to find and run large language models in infrastructure. It's simply not available or become very, very expensive. So you have to decide in your organization where you will go and invest. Are you going to buy, or are you going to collocate with somebody else, and so on and so forth. That's the next decision you have to make. Deployment model, data. Data is the biggest roadblock for us in generative AI today. If we do not have data, which is your own data, your models will not function the way you want it to be. And hence, if you do not have access to data, first go source the right data with which you are going to test the generative AI model and then start the project. Now these points seem to be very, very intuitive, but this is what we have learned, and there are some of my colleagues are sitting here smiling at me, that we have learned it the hard way as to how you can work for 6 months and get 0 outcome. You have set up the infrastructure, you have identified the best use case, but you're not getting an outcome. The last is security and governance. There are systems which is already, there are tools and assets which the black operators, the dark operators are already enabling and will fine-tune your models in a way which will give wrong results. It is designed to give wrong results. They have broken the code. So security of your data, security of your use case is very, very important. So from a technology perspective, these are the 5 or 6 things you have to keep in mind, just checkbox. Once you have set this technology up, you have to start working on the capability piece. The biggest decision you have to make in the capability piece is, are you going to hire or are you going to train your own people? Our knowledge is up to 70-80%, my personal view is up to 70-80% of your own team should be enabled on generative AI. You do not need a new team, be it process or be it technology. you should be able to reskill your existing team to work on generative AI, and then about 20% of the team is who you have to go hire new. That's the key message we wanted to give, that do not try to hire a new team for generative AI. Why? Because you need business context, and a new person will not have the business context. You need your existing team to be reskilled. So just to, if for us, across here, our jobs are as of now secure. They are not going to replace us from a coding or from a process perspective, because they will need people to run the use cases. So prioritization, multiple priorities, and staffing, replace or automate. The next thing, once you have finalized on the technology and the capability, third is the business value. So once you have done that, you have to decide your organization is asking for ROI in the 6 months, 12 months, or even 3 years. There are organizations which are investing for 3 years return, which is, then you select a use case based on that. But if your organization is looking for ROI in the next 6 months, you have to look for use cases which are real and which can give you an outcome in the next 6 months. And it's very easy to do. You have to go back to my earlier chart and look at those areas which are industry, where the use cases are mapped to summarization, content creation. You will get an ROI very, very quickly. And some of my previous speakers also spoke about 70, 80, 100%, 200x benefit. Easily doable. Identify the right use case. Once you have set these three up, then you go over to a partner ecosystem and data. You will not be able to do it alone. You will require a partner. The reason being, it is an expansive field. And if you want to build capability across technology, across capability, across models and so on and so forth, you'll spend an year or 2 years just to get ready. Don't get into that conundrum. You should partner with somebody. I'm not selling any of my organizations, anyone, but you have to partner with specialist firms who have been doing the research in this area. And that's the way you will fast track your movement towards generative AI outcomes. That's the way you'll fast track your ROI. The next thing we spoke about is data adequacy. I briefly spoke about it, that the biggest thing about data is not only about availability, but it's also about the quality of the data. If your data, and you saw what what happened for Google in the last, I'm sure all of you have read that. If you train the data in a way which is biased, you will get output which is biased. How do you know your data is not biased? Not an easy job to do. So you will have to go and understand that data before you go ahead and start applying the GenAI principles onto your use cases. So again, these are the 6 check boxes. If I have to go give an exam based on my limited learning, these are the 6 areas, and I go and present this to our clients that, look, these are the 20 things you have to set in place before you start talking about, I have to implement generative AI. I have heard a lot about it. My CEO wants 20x, 30x. Please take this to the CEO with the dollars next to it, and the CEO calms down. Because for each of this, it doesn't come free. Yes, I'll give you $20 million, $50 million, but you give me this $2 million because I have to set these 6 things up. That's how the CIOs are going back, and feel free to have the same conversation in your organization, and I'm across this. So the question is, having done this, what do I do next? It's a 4-step process. The first and foremost thing, and please don't forget this, the first and foremost things of generative AI is set up the governance. Governance, I'll speak about what governance means. It is about data governance, it is about the guardrails, it is about compliance, it is about the security, and so on and so forth. Do not start in your organization any GenAI project unless you have defined the governance and the guardrails within which your organization has to work. Excuse me. Once you have set the guidelines, you have created a set of rules in which your team has to work, then you go set up what we are calling as an incubator, which could be a sort of a garage, it could be sort of a center of excellence, whatever you want to do. Put in a small set of people there, pick up the right set of use cases and build that within the constraints of the governance. The governance will define the architecture, define the models and so on and so forth. And then you can scale and you can take it forward. But two key messages from this chart. First, set up the governance, and please read through. Governance itself is a 1 hour discussion at the minimum. Read through what does governance entail, and then you go for incubation, not the other way around. Don't take a use case and start working on it. My last chart for today, sorry, it went off. So, 4 key takeaways as we finish today's conversation. First, create a common use case repository. Why? Because if it's a 50,000 organization or 5,000 organization, if everybody starts creating a use case of their own, your costs will balloon up. The first thing every organization is doing who are mature in generative AI is creating a governance around use case repository which determines what use case they will take up. There's a whole flow. There's a governance body which decides which use case they will invest in, and only those use cases are taken forward. So set up the use case repository. The second thing is common infrastructure. As I said, infrastructure is still very, very expensive. It is expected to go down in the next 10 to 15, in the next 4 to 6 quarters significantly based on what we are seeing from a research perspective. But set up the common infrastructure so that the teams are not buying infrastructure in groups, and at the end of the year you find that a lot of money has already gone down the drain. The third, and I spoke about, is set the governance guardrails. Very, very important in terms of ethics, in terms of architecture, in terms of process. Ethics is one of the biggest challenges for generative AI, and all my speakers have spoken about. I'll just talk about that there are 2 or 3 things which are very, very important for ethics. A, transparency. Second, explainability. And third, equality. First, let's take one by one. Transparency means we should be able to understand what data has come from, where the data has come from, what data has been used, and so on and so forth. It's not easy to do it technically. It's very, very difficult. Second, we spoke about explainability. Gen AI is thinking. We don't know how it has arrived at the result. You, as we as business and IT managers, should be able to explain how a Gen AI has arrived at that result. Third and most important, and the Google is a perfect example, is equality. It should not be biased. It should not give a result which is biased because of the data it has ingested. So once you have decided on 3, how do you control this? Is where you control the data, you control the rules by which data is ingested into the models. The data ingestion, quality of the data is going to be important. And that brings me to the 4th point, which is around data, which is the source. You have to identify the source. Internet is filled with data. Internet filled with people who knowingly give you wrong data so that your models misbehave. So looking at the source of the data and then how you're processing it is important. So with that, I'm going to end. I'm going to give back about 3 minutes back. But the key message I wanted to again summarize is for generative AI, it is nothing which is going to happen immediately. It will take at least a year to 2 years for even some of the difficult use cases. But in some use cases, like text, like summarization, like content creation, that technology is available today, and we should pick up. If we have to succeed, if we have to show results immediate, we should pick up those use cases which are going to show us in good light, which is going to give ROI in the immediate term. And then while we continue to practice and preach about how we can build solutions for the long term, but it's not going to take up our jobs, that's for sure. So thank you very much.
Thank you.
Hopefully it was more practical. I was not like Anish, but it was almost like a checkbox for an exam. When you go back to our organizations, you can say that these are the 8 or 10 things which summarized took me almost 8-9 months we have been working on, or a year we have been working on. Not IBM has been working for a long time, but this is my views. I have been working for about 9 to 10 months. Thank you very much.